Yesterday, while we were discussing this third great reviewing, we were talking about the nature of the mind and body in terms of striker element, base element, and ignition element. It is more understandable than talking about aggregates or mind and body. It is better to understand, it is better by explaining in terms of elements, known in Pali as dhatu, which means that it bears its own nature. That means it has things as they are. It bears its own nature as it is, or as they are. For instance, when you are hearing a sound, that is the ear or ear sensitivity, which exists as a result of past karma and weather conditions and food. That's why the ear sensitivity is existing, and there are the sound waves which strike the eardrum. That is known as striker element. The ear is a base element. And the resultant hearing consciousness is ignition element. So at once you hear it, and when it is translated, you understand the meaning of it, which follows the hearing consciousness. In 1 second, many changes take place regarding this ignition element. And there is this contact of the three. That is the ear sensitivity, the sound, and the hearing consciousness. That is another mentality besides hearing consciousness. Then the feeling, good or bad. When you hear pleasant sound, you feel good. When you hear unpleasant sound, you feel bad. So there are good and bad feelings. In this way, it is just like when you are trying to make fire with the use of the magnifying glass and sun, which is exposed to sunlight. When the sun rays are very strong, then you have something underneath to take fire, to catch fire. Then after some time, when there is enough heat, it will burn. That is, magnifying glass is like a base element. The sunlight is like a striker element, and the fire is like the ignition element. And as for the cause, if there are no such thing as ear or sound wave, there cannot be any hearing consciousness, even if there are 1,000 or 10,000 supreme beings trying to cause it. Cause it means cause hearing consciousness. There won't be any hearing consciousness. And also, if these conditions are fulfilled, namely when you have the eardrum and the sound striking the eardrum, then no supreme being, no amount of supreme being will be able to prevent you from hearing it. Therefore, there is no such thing as a living entity or controlling entity in these elements. So with the practice of meditation, you are able to understand things in the true nature, so that you overcome the view of self or soul, such as individual self or soul, or supreme self or soul. By being able to understand mind and body, you overcome the view of individual self or soul, and by understanding the cause and effect relationship, you overcome the view of supreme self or supreme soul or supreme being. But this is only partially or part-time basis. You will overcome to the point of no return totally only when you realize the first mundane path. So while you are noting these elements, you overcome these wrong views. And if you are able to understand mind and body and the causal relationship, you overcome the view of individual self or soul and Supreme Self or Soul. The only difference in so too in the case of smelling, tasting, touching, thinking, if one is able to concentrate the mind, yogis are bound to understand these elements. The only difference is in thinking, thoughts and ideas. There's a hard base, and knowing consciousness, and the object of thought, that is thoughts or ideas which are the objects, can maybe either materiality or mentality, or sometimes is conceptual objects. And in the text is shown is the virtuous one, yogis, whether monks or lay persons, is bound to understand the universal characteristics of these 5 aggregates of clinging, but there is no such thing as self or soul in them. If one is noting correctly, what has been preached is anicca, impermanence, and one cannot just hold the view of permanence in an opposite way, just to oppose it, just to contradict it. And what has been preached is unsatisfactoriness. One cannot just say it is pleasure or pleasant or satisfactory, just to refute it. And what has been preached is mind and body are just a process. There's no self or soul in it, but one cannot just contradict by saying there is self or soul in mind, body. So initially, one must understand on the theoretical basis, from book knowledge, these 3 characteristics of impermanence and so on. And also when one is undertaking the practice, one should also practice mindfulness correctly. Then what are the benefits? If one is able to practice satisfactorily and reaching to the maturity of the practice until one realizes the path and fruition or knowledge of the Noble One, such a person will be steadfast in moral virtue, well grounded, firmly grounded in moral virtue. And as one is noting every arising of the 6 sense doors, one is bound to see the universal characteristics of impermanence and so on. As for the Sarabhana, he or she realizes from the stage of instantaneous arising and passing away of psychophysical phenomena, and progressing along the path of insight knowledge, one realizes the path of fruition knowledge of the Noble One. And while one is practicing mindfulness, one experiences the cessation of both mind and body. And both mind and body are cut off in pairs. So, as for such is how the Sarabhana realizes the usual nature of the Dhamma. Whoever practices mindfulness, practice, and understand these 5 aggregates of clinging, all the 3 elements, namely the base element, the strike element, and the ignition element, in terms of the 3 universal characteristics of impermanence and so on, is bound to reach the path and fruition knowledge of the Noble One. And this is how one realizes the first supermundane path. And if one is able to do that, isn't it clear that one can become the Sarabhana after noting these 5 aggregates of clinging, or the 3 elements of base element, striker element, and ignition element? It is quite obvious. So while one is being mindful of the 3 characteristics, or mindful of these 5 aggregates, or the 3 elements in terms of the in terms of these universal characteristics, one is bound to progress along the path from the first supermundane path to the second supermundane path, namely Sakaragami, Mega, And if one continues to practice along the path, cultivating mindfulness of these 5 aggregates, or the 3 elements of base, base, striker and ignition element, in terms of the 3 universal characteristics, one is bound to realize the 3rd superabundant path, namely Anagami Mega. And so on, and so too, if one is able to progress along a path and cultivate mindfulness of 5 aggregates, all the 3 elements in terms of the 3 universal characteristics, one is bound to realize the final path, or the 4th superabundant path, that is arahantship, eradicating defilements, all defilements, to the point of no return. Even after one has become arahant, that is realized the final path, stage of sanctity, one also continues to practice mindfulness of these 5 aggregates of clinging on the 3 elements in terms of the universal characteristics of impermanence and so on. So that even if one has become an arahant, the final path, by being able to cultivate like this, one can live with real peace and happiness by being absorbed in the fruition attainment. So as for the arahant, the final holiness, he or she is always mindful, never lose mindfulness, never negligent, never heedless. So as much as one is mindful, one is bound to see the arising and passing away of these objects noted. So one has got to practice mindfulness of these 5 aggregates, mind, body, psychophysical aggregates, all the 3 elements of base element, striker, ignition element, from the stage of Puthujjana, that is ordinary being. While one is an ordinary being, one should be able to cultivate mindfulness of these 5 aggregates. Now the yogis are practicing initially in this way, before they have realized the supermundane path, since the stage of Puthujjana, that is ordinary being, up to the stage of the realization of the final path, they are noting, cultivating mindfulness of these 5 aggregates of clinging. So even if one does not become arahant, not yet become arahant, one should be able to practice mindfulness so that one will be able to live to good advantage, for the benefit of oneself while living in this period of Buddha's dispensation, so as one will be free from falling into the states of loss. After one has become the arahant, the final path holiness, one lives with mindfulness so as to be able to live with peace and happiness in their very life. So one has got to still practice even after arahantship. Excuse me. So by practicing in this way, one is bound to realize at the maturity of the practice the first supermundane path, and in this way one has got to be mindful of the 5 aggregates of 5 psychophysical aggregates as they arise at the 6 sense doors. Or in other words, in a sense, be mindful of the 3 elements, the base, striker and ignition elements. And in this way, by being able to know properly, with dedication, the 3 elements or the psychophysical aggregate, there are times that one will be able to reach this stage of insight knowledge known as samasana jnana, knowledge of reflection, reflecting in terms of the 3 characteristics of psychophysical phenomena within 1 week. If one is very keen, and if one is more intelligent or keen, then not even 1 week, one will be able to realize this insight knowledge, namely this knowledge of reflection within 2 or 3 days. And reaching the majority of practice, one is bound to realize the path and fruition knowledge of the noble ones. In this way, after one has become the Sarapana, that is realized the first supermundane path, one oneself considers or reflects in this way, that is there any other denomination and teachings, are there any such holiness or recluse who reach Sarapana stage in other teachings? And he reflects in this way that there is none in any other teachings. This is realized by oneself. So there is none in other teachings. None means no such recluse who has realized the first supermundane path or any supermundane path in other teachings. Only in this teaching, that is Buddha Sasana, in this dispensation called Dhamma Vinaya, doctrine, discipline, is there such things as the realization of the supermundane path. So there's no such view, realization of such view in other denominations and other teachings, nor the practice of Satipatthana, and also no such view as regards the existence of Nirvana, where mind body cease to exist, and no such view exists in other teachings. So if one has not realized this kind of Dhamma nature, or come to understand the Dhamma nature of the Dhamma, one will be seeking teachers, whether this teacher is good or that teacher is good, whether this method is good or that method is good. So one will be seeking after this teacher or that teacher or this method or that method. But as for Sarapana, after one has realized the first permanent path, there will be no such uncertainty or no such problem about seeking after these teachers or methods. As I said, this accomplishment by realizing experientially, that is by one's own personal experience. After having understood by one's own personal experience in this way, in Pali it is known as Pichakasida, one is never misled or misguided. One never gets lost. And one comes to believe that this method is correct. And then by undertaking this method, one is bound to realize the inside knowledge progressing along the path until one realizes the cessation of mind and body. Then after one has realized that, one becomes settled in this realization. One considers that one is realizing by oneself. One has discovered the truth, and one is looking down, so to speak. That is, looking with upper hand, not just looking up, but looking down. Such is the third great reviewing. In this regard, during the Buddha's time, Elder Wappa remarked, before he undertaking the practice, when he saw Buddha, he could not understand. He thought it was just like any other person. But only when he undertook the practice and realized the knowledge of mind and body in terms of the three characteristics, progressing along the path of inside knowledge, realizing Nibbana, when it becomes very clear, and that he remarked that the person who has the eye will see who sees or who doesn't see. The person who doesn't have the eye will not see whether one sees or one doesn't see. And the ancient people have composed it. In similar way, that the seer sees who sees or who doesn't see. And the non-seer doesn't see who sees or doesn't see. It looks like a riddle. So that was the puzzle of seeing and not seeing. And this is about what happens outside of the Buddha's teaching, Buddha Sasana. There are no correct methods, nor the cessation or eradication of defilements and other teachings. And this, as regards this, there has been this incidents about the story of Subhadda, Paripācika, ascetic Subhadda, an ascetic called Subhadda, as given in Mahāvāga of the Digha Nikaya, long discourses of the Buddha, and laying down the principle, the Dhamma principle. It happened like this: when the Buddha was nearing his the great passing away, Mahaparinibbana, there was this problem about whether other religious leaders who were the contemporaries, they knew the Dhamma or they did not know the Dhamma. And Subhadda was not satisfied with this. Although he was devoted in some way to the Buddha, other leaders, religious leaders like Purana Kadapa and so on, knew what they were preaching, knew the Dhamma, or they did not know the Dhamma. So there's to this question posed by Subhadda, Buddha answered that he laid down these two principles. That and whatever teaching there is not the practice of the noble path of constituents, there cannot be any recluse or holy person who has eradicated defilements, neither can there be any realizer of the first path, second path, third path, or fourth path. In whatever teaching there is this Dhamma Vinaya, in whatever teaching or Dhamma Vinaya there is this noble path of a constituent, can there be these recluse or holy persons who has eradicated the defilements. And that Subhadda was very satisfied. So this meaning of Dhamma Vinaya, doctrine, discipline. Doctrine means the instructions or the guidance, the teachings for the welfare and prosperity of others, of oneself or others. And Vinaya, discipline, is just rules of conduct. And when one is practicing in accordance with the instructions given, one has got to follow the disciplinary rules. In this way, as much as one is able to cultivate one's physical, verbal, mental behaviors, one is bound to realize the overcoming of defilements. If one cultivates in a small way, one is bound to realize his cessation in a small way. If one is able to practice much cultivation of these physical, verbal, mental behaviors, one is bound to realize much eradication of defilements. And if one has realized the first superabundant path, one is bound to overcome the relevant defilements. In this way, the Buddha laid down two principles so that those who come with faith and confidence will be able to undertake a practice, so that it will be practical for them. So in this way, he laid down these principles. The first one is he declared boldly that only in this teaching that there is this the practice of the noble path of eight constituents. That means the practice of the three trainings, that is morality, concentration and wisdom, which means the teaching sadhana without affecting other people, because it is very beneficial to those who came with faith and confidence in him without affecting other religious leaders. Again, another principle that he laid down was only in this dispensation or teaching that there can be or there are these recluses or holy people who are able to eradicate the defilements. And if one is able to practice, then there will be these individuals who can overcome defilements. In this way, when one becomes Sotapanna, as Sotapanna, he or she reviews in this way by his or her own intellect that one has become Sotapanna, has realized the first mundane path, which is in accordance with this puzzle. The seer sees who sees or doesn't see. The non-seer, or the one who doesn't see who sees or who doesn't see. Like a puzzle. So please try and think about it. So you do know it by yourself, and this is how the one who realizes the path will be able to realize by oneself. In this way, it becomes very clear for oneself, and also it's clear that other religious leaders are not seeing. This one can conclude by oneself. Such is the end of the third great reviewing, about which the Venerable Master Sayadaw has composed his fixed law or aphorism, which I have ventured to compose, though I don't possess any talent to compose any poem or verse. And it runs like this. One decides there is neither the stillness of defilement nor the attainment of the path outside of this dispensation. And this is the third knowledge attained by him, that is noble, supramundane, no shared by ordinary people. In this way, the decision is that only in this dispensation, teaching, or Dhamma Vinaya, that there are these the attainment of the path. That's all.